Hey guys, hello. I'm going to do a live podcast recording on troubleshooting your cycle when it goes to hell, which is kind of what's happened for me. And so, because of that, I'm going to just share my journey and what's been going on. So, I am just going to hang out for a few minutes just to kind of say hello to all of you Instagram folks. And then I will be I'm going to cover up my phone, so it's going to, well, not cover, but like I'm going to cover the comments because I find it hard to not get distracted by the comments, and especially when there's lots of activity happening. I just find it a little bit challenging to like do the podcast and also focus on that, and so I'm taking myself out of the equation. I'm just covering it up with sticky notes, so I won't be answering questions per se, but you can just hear my story live and hear what's been going on. So I'm going to write what this podcast recording is going to be about. Just give me 1 second. All right, so we're going to talk about troubleshooting your cycle when it goes to hell. Like I said, that's kind of been my deal recently. All right. I'm going to pin this comment and then we're going to get started. Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to be covering what I have been doing when it comes to, thanks for the hearts, what I've been doing for myself because you'll hear it on the podcast, but I had a recent pain flare, and chronic pain is a central nervous system disease. So then my cycle, I haven't been ovulating, and so it's been messing with how my cycle shows up. So I had a really short cycle, and then this one's a little longer, but it still didn't ovulate. And so I'm trying to get it back on track. And I know for sure I'm not the only one that has been going through some stuff like this, because life happens, our cycle gets thrown up. So we'll just be talking about all of that. And then like I said, I'm going to cover up the comments just so I don't get distracted while I'm talking. But then after the episode, I'll be back to answer questions and all of that good stuff. I might have to start a second live because it may go over an hour because I have tons of awesome stuff. But also, since you're on video, I'm going to be showing you the products that I'm talking about. If you're listening to the podcast later or whatever, I'm going to just say the names. So you'll still have the possibility to check them out. All right, so I'm going to start recording live here in just a little while. So I was telling everyone on earlier, I get a little bit nervous when I'm doing both the live recording and the podcast recording. And Megan and I were talking about this because I'm not 100% sure why, and I think it's sometimes all of the tech stuff that worries me. And so I'm trying to a little bit take myself out of the equation here by using sticky notes to cover up stuff so that I can't get distracted or anything else. All right, so I'm going to start doing the podcast, and I didn't even know you could zoom in like that. All right, guys. All right, I'm going to hit record, and I will see you guys after. All right. Hi there. This is Alex. I am doing a solo podcast episode. If you didn't catch the last 2 episodes, we had 2 amazing people that we interviewed. So one was Dr. Laura Bryden, who is the writer of the Period Repair Manual. She's amazing, has a ton of experience with hormonal problems, and I specifically wanted to talk to her about PMS since we have our PMS project coming out. And so that was amazing. Go listen to that. And then Megan just did one. It's going to come out this week with Dr. Elena Ramel. And so that is a lot on pregnancy and pediatric things. a little bit about vaccines. She's got some really awesome content in her program that we really respect. So if you haven't caught those yet, make sure you go and do that first. And then, well, you don't have to do it first. You can do it. You can come back and listen to those later, but definitely make sure you check those out. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about troubleshooting when your cycle goes to hell. And I've been sharing a little bit as I've been going along that basically a little while ago I had a really bad chronic pain flare. And for a lot of people, they're not clear on pain. So the really easy way to explain it is that acute pain is a symptom. Chronic pain is a disease. It's a central nervous system disease. And when the central nervous system begins to have dysfunction and begins to signal inappropriately, we can get a whole constellation of symptoms. My pain flare was brought on by medication changes, stress. There was a lot kind of going into it at that moment, and my body just couldn't handle the load, and it began to let me know that something was not right. Now, how this relates to my cycle is that I feel like they're super duper connected. So the reason that Megan and I get neurotransmitter testing in addition to hormonal testing when we work with women inside our Healthy Hormones Group program for their individualized protocols, we always get neurotransmitter testing because you can basically try to balance hormones till the cows come home, but if you do not know what signal the brain and spinal cord are sending the hormonal system, you have no idea if the hormones are simply reacting to that message, and a lot of times they are. And so it gets to be really frustrating when you are kind of addressing one piece and not addressing an underlying root cause, and then that really throws off your cycle. So people get into this experience where they keep taking stuff to balance their hormones, and maybe it gets better, maybe it doesn't, but even if it does get better, when the supplements go away, things go back to being the way they were. So with this whole central nervous system shift and change in signaling, then for me it really set off issues with my cycle, because basically the message that my central nervous system was sending to my body is that I'm not safe. And when we are not safe, either from physical cues, mental cues, emotional cues, then our body does something that is protective, which means if the body says, well, we're not in a very safe place right now, there's no way that your body is going to try to get you pregnant. And the worse the shift and the more stress that the body perceives, the more it will respond to that. And so for me, I haven't ovulated 2 cycles in a row, and I have not had regular cycles. So one of my cycles, as it was happening, I had like a 12-day cycle. I mean, they were literally back to back, with spotting in between. This one, because of the stuff that I'm doing now that I'm going to share, is obviously getting better, but it's still not great. So now I'm like at a 22-day cycle. I've had a little bit of spotting because I know I didn't ovulate this month, and we'll talk about that. And so I'm just trying to get myself back. And I wanted to talk through troubleshooting. So I just want to start out by saying it's really not okay to just take what I'm taking because I'm taking it, like for you. So if you don't know what's going on with your body, if you haven't had functional lab work, this is not something to play around with. This requires actual medical provider support, so that you do not inadvertently place an even bigger stress on your body. If you are working with someone, great. What I hope that this does is that it facilitates you having a meaningful conversation with your providers and the people that you work with. Our ladies in the group, come to us, we do their personalized protocol and answer their questions. It doesn't matter if you do it with us, though. You just have to be working with someone that you trust and someone that you know knows what they're talking about with all this stuff. Okay, so that is just a disclaimer. And also just that's not just because I'm trying to like CYA myself. It's more of the fact that like I know that these things are really powerful, and we all have to recognize that. I mean, if we don't believe that herbal supplements and all these interventions work, if we have that belief, then we also have to accept that they also have potential side effects and downsides. Nothing in the healthcare world is free, is kind of how we always say it. It's not something you don't just magically get to impact your physiology without the physiology most of the time changing and communicating back to you. So that is the continual discussion that we need to have with our own bodies and also with our healthcare teams. Okay, so that's a big one. So there's 3 major categories that I'm going to go through, and this of course is on top of my personalized protocol from my last round of functional testing, the stuff that I was talking about before. So I have a protocol that I have been on, and I still have that going, because when I took that hit with the pain flare, then I basically kind of reverted back to what my body was already struggling with. It wasn't necessarily that I had new problems, although I do plan on testing again soon. Probably next cycle will be the time I test, but that protocol is still working underneath all of this, but I've added by the phases and some not what I'm doing on top of that. Okay, so this isn't a comprehensive look at what I'm doing. This is just my outline of 3 different areas that I am actively working on. Okay, so the 3 different areas are root cause work. So there's things that Megan and I are working on for me that are addressing what is making my central nervous system signal the way it does in the first place. And so I had certain things in my environment growing up in Russia. I had a lot of heavy metal toxicity. I had mold exposure. I had undiagnosed celiac and endometriosis, and I have a really hefty family and personal history of autoimmunity. And so for all those things, we are doing concentrated work, and I'll walk through all of that. But the kind of summary of it is the kill, bind, sweat approach that Dr. Jess, if you're not following her, Dr. Jess MD, talks about a lot, and I really like it. And so I've been doing that as well. So I'll go through that. The second part that I'm going to talk about is optimizing inflammation in phases 1 and 2. So this is our 4-phase cycle approach, and I am adding, I already had parts that I was addressing in each of the phases, like we're going to teach you in our upcoming PMS project. But I've added on top of it a couple things that I have recently learned, and some of the stuff that I only use for emergency situations like this. So I will go through all of that with you. And then the third part will be optimizing detoxification, and that will be during phases 3 and 4 of the cycle. So I'm going to be preemptively addressing some of the issues that have been coming up for me, some symptoms of, what you classically would think of as PMS. And there are a lot of things that Dr. Bryden and I talked about in our podcast with her that I incorporated into my pre-existing routine. So those are the 3 main areas I'm going to hit up, and I'm going to start with the root cause work. Okay, so with the things that I mentioned, we are trying to address why my central nervous system is being dysfunctional to begin with. And so I'm having, worsening pain and worsening chemical sensitivity. And that is basically my brain and my limbic system beginning to let me know that there is a cycle there and a path there that is being impacted by something. Now, with mold, heavy metal toxicity, you don't always know exactly, like, to go back in time and figure out exactly what happened. I'll just give an example. I got my first mercury filling when I was 6 years old in Russia. That was just standard of care at the time, and in a place that was essentially government less for a while, because I was born in 87. And so I did not have great nutrition. Why didn't I have good enamel? Well, I didn't, my family didn't have food a lot. And so I didn't have good enamel. I ended up getting mercury fillings. I had mercury fillings that went in after that. I hadn't had a good dentist that understood mercury fillings as well, so I've had people in my childhood mess with them as well. And so all of those things are things I know, but it's hard to know by going back in time and like what's still acting on it. However, with this protocol of the kill, bind, sweat, which I will get into, it tends to be fairly comprehensive, so I don't necessarily need to identify very specifically which one was kind of the final straw. I just know that I had all those exposures, and so I want to support my body if those are the things that are setting it off. Okay, so as part of this thing, we're going to talk about killing first. And so for any sort of chronic infection, but because I recently moved to the Pacific Northwest, and Megan was kind of like, well, there's mold, why don't you kind of support your body with that? And we live in an old rental, and it definitely had water damage, and for some reason the previous renters had taken out the French drains. I'm not sure why. And so this is a way to catch all of that and make sure that it's not further throwing me off. Okay, so I got biocidin at Megan's recommendation. It's by Biobotanical Research, and this is the kill. I also have the liver sauce, which I don't have in front of me, but it's the Quicksilver Scientific. It comes in it's called Push and Catch. So the Push is the liver sauce that has a bunch of support for the liver enzymes and lymphatic system, and just kind of getting everything mobilized that needs to come out. And then you follow it up with the binder. So the biocidin and the liver sauce are the kill. I have 2 binders that I have added for the bind portion. So I get constipated easily. And so in that case, when I was using the Quicksilver Scientific Ultra Binder, which is a universal toxin binder, as much as one can be completely universal for everything, I was just finding that it was working great, but it was making me constipated. So now I got from Eco Nugenics the Pectisol C. They also have Pecticlear, and so it's a modified citrus pectin, which is a more gentle binder, but it also has properties that helps you not be constipated. And then the Pecticlear, I would have gotten that, but they were out at the time. But the Pecticlear also has like alginates in it, so it is another binder mix in with it. That's the one I would have gotten. But because the Pectisol C isn't as comprehensive, what I've been doing instead is that I've been 2 days of the Pectisol C, and then on the 3rd day I'll do the Ultra Binder from Quicksilver Scientific. And so one day, every 3rd day is not enough to impact my BMs essentially. and that's extra important when you're binding and killing, because if you don't eliminate, it's going to impact your hormones. And so for me, it's not, the Ultra Binder would be great if I could do it, but it's not worth doing it and then risking being constipated. And so this has been the sweet spot that I have found for myself that works. And then I take a couple days off everything every so often. And just personally, I find it easiest to remember when I don't have, or when I have my period the first couple days, because my period has been impacted, I haven't felt that great during the first couple days. And so that's my cue to be like, I'm going to really shut down. I'm going to relax. I'm going to, and I don't mean shut down in a bad way. I mean, like, I'm going to relax and just really, respect my body's signals that now's the time for planning, introspection, all of those things that we talk about in phase 1. So that is the bind section of that. And then the last part is sweat. And that I've been doing with detox baths or just baths in general. So not all of my baths are geared to be extra detoxifying, and we'll talk about that in the third section in phases 3 and 4 when I do make it like extra detox oriented. A lot of times it's just the sweat portion, so that one's just an Epsom salt bath and to sweat it out. And then I hit up the infrared sauna whenever I can. I have a place that is just down the street, so it hasn't been very hard, and I just go a couple times a week or maybe once a week just to really effectively sweat it out. So that's been the kill, bind, sweat. Now, there are things that happen with the kill, bind, sweat, that the symptoms that come up for people, and that certainly has been true for me as well. And so I have things that I do that support my body in processing and mobilizing all the toxins. So the process of mobilization of toxins is a little bit of a tricky one, and why we really like having a binder on. And part of it is because your body hides toxins mostly in fat tissue, but it will do it in any available place that it thinks won't harm you. When you pull it out into the bloodstream, then there's potential for things to get a little wonky, right? I mean, that's why our body tries to hide it from us and why we try to avoid toxins in general. That's not always possible when we have a childhood history of something. I mean, I can't go back in time and change that. So for when being on binders, there's sometimes mood shifts that happen. One, because sometimes you can bind the things that are good as well, because they're not so specific to toxins that they won't bind other stuff. And for overall brain support and to make sure the brain is always getting the good nutrition and the good building blocks that it needs, I've added phosphatidylcholine, and I got the Designs for Health brand. And so I've been taking this, Megan told me to take it at breakfast after, 30 minutes after the binder, which you have to wait at least 30 minutes after the binder to eat. Otherwise potentially it will absorb your nutrients for you. And since I try to eat healthy, I, don't want that to happen. So, or even if I didn't eat healthy, I still wouldn't want that to happen. So phosphatidylcholine has been really, really helpful. And then for extra mood support, because I've just found that with my cycle being impacted and trying to do this root cause work, sometimes my moods and my peacefulness tend to be the first things that go out the window. And so sometimes for me, anxiety is something that really pops up during this time, especially when we have had the experience of having hormonal problems that were ignored for a really long time. And I have a lot of fear in symptoms, and this is something that we talk about all the time because it's something we want to address for our ladies. It's super duper important to overcome the fear of your own body and trusting in the wisdom of your own body. So many of us have been made to feel like our symptoms are not real, and when you do that over and over again, then it begins to build this mistrust. And so we'll talk about this at the last part, but I've been doing DNRS, which is a dynamic neural retraining system for the limbic system. And that's certainly been helping, but sometimes when it is a physical driver of that fear, then there are things that I can do and I know work for me to help me feel better. So L-theanine is something that I like leaning on. So I usually stay between 100 milligrams and 200 milligrams, and I get the Jarrow Formulas brand. And then I also have GABA. I have the Source Naturals brand right now, but we actually like for GABA and 5-HTP the Neurogistics brand, which is who we do our neurotransmitter testing with. And neurotransmitters are things like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, histamine, glutamate, all of those important things. And so I like that brand better, but I just didn't have access to it at the time that I got this. So this is what I have now. Both GABA and L-theanine are something that needs to be up titrated and handled carefully. So these two are things from my protocol that I have already had testing to figure out if that was a good fit for me. Okay, so these are things that I waited to add until I knew what was happening. And then lastly in this category, I've been doing colostrum IC from Sovereign Laboratories. And this is for overall immune function. And what colostrum does, as you probably know, since we have a lot of ladies who have had babies or know about it, but colostrum is a great way to balance the immune system when it's either overreacting or underreacting. And either way, we don't want that to be the case. Kind of like how we say optimizing inflammation, and people are like, well, don't we want to lower inflammation? A lot of times we do. Modern life tends to make us over-inflammatory, but there's some people who straight up can't even mount enough of a response in the immune system to have a regular period. Shedding the endometrium is a controlled inflammatory response, and so you can definitely be underactive in your immune system, and that can cause problems as well. You can be underactive in your inflammatory system, and the two are very, very, very much related in multiple areas, and I won't go into that in this particular episode, but the two systems work in concert with one another. And so I've been adding this, and this I really feel like I actually had to titrate up slowly because it was very effective, and I felt that it's also had a really good effect on my gut function. And so I've really kept it around. And so this whole part of the root cause work, the number one, this is something that I'm doing throughout my cycle, that I'm going to take a little break, like I said, probably in the beginning of the next cycle, and then start up again. So this is something that I need support most of the time, but there's still times where I give my body a break to make sure that it just has a little bit of a downtime to catch up if I've been pushing it a little too hard, or if there are things that need repair. Those are my days where I'm going to get extra sleep. Is going to be the days where I make sure I'm doing my meditation and breath work, maybe some self-love rituals. Those are all very, very powerful things, and really also facilitate the body doing what it needs to get done. All right, so that is the first one. Now, the second thing that we're going to talk about is optimizing inflammation. And the goal for that is for phases 1 and 2 lead up to ovulation. So phase 2 ends when you ovulate, and that's what transitions you from phase 2 to phase 3. And that's called the luteal phase, if any of you have heard that phrase. So when I get to this part of my cycle, phases 1 and 2, that's when I'm really doing everything that my body needs to send the message that it is safe for me to ovulate, and that my body has the support and the tools to do so effectively. Okay? So with that, when you're thinking in those terms, if you don't know if you're ovulating or not, well, then that gets really tricky, because how do you then know if what you're doing is moving you in the right direction or not. So in our last episode with Dr. Laura Bryden, what she was saying was that she loves basal body temperature tracking more than LH strips. And so that is something that I got a thermometer for, and I've done it before, so I actually got a regular thermometer. I always have enough of a jump that's fine, but some people will need actual basal body temperatures. From what I understand, when it has 2 decimal points, it's not necessarily that it's that much more accurate, so you just have to be careful when you're looking, because from what I understand, some of them make claims that they're like accurate to, you know, 100th or 1,000th of a degree, and I've also seen some contradicting things that potentially they're not so much on the accuracy. You know, they'll give you a number, but it may not be all that helpful to add those extra numbers on. I feel like that is a personal, you know, call. If you have a regular thermometer, which is what I did, and I just tried it to see if it worked, and it did, and so that's what I've been using the whole time. But if you have a basal body temperature, those things are awesome too. And then I've been tracking the temperatures with the app Eggy, and it actually has a bunch of functionality. I really like it, in terms of you can track symptoms, you can track medications that you're taking, your temperature, your cervical fluid, all of that. It's really kind of a fun app that I recently found. And so I'm tracking that. I have also done LH strips previously, but now I've kind of gone back to doing the temperature because it's really not that hard, and I feel like it's probably more accurate. Then besides the actual tracking of, and actually let me go back for a second and just say, when you are looking for ovulation through temperature tracking, what you see is that your temperature in phases 1 and 2 will be lower. And then if you ovulate a couple days after you ovulate, so it's not predictive, it's retrospective, and you have to do it for a couple months to see what's happening. But, after you ovulate, then you'll see an appreciable jump in your basal body temperature, and you just do it at the same time each day, look for the jump. Okay, so that's kind of the easy way to think about it. You can also read about the fertility method if that's something that you're interested in, because there's lots and lots and lots of things out there for this. In general, I tend to be a little like, I think some people overcomplicate it, and then it makes other people feel like they're doing it completely wrong. As long as you are able to track what you need to track, and you are seeing that jump based on how you're doing it, then in my mind, that's great. So if you're new to this, you don't have to do it perfectly. You'll get better. You'll figure it out. It's not a huge deal. So don't let all the details like mess with your mind too much. Okay, so with inflammation, our name is literally Zesty Ginger, so you know I can not get something gingery. I got this ginger juice that I've been adding to my elixirs, and I've also been mixing it with tart cherry concentrate, which just personally works really well for me for fighting inflammation. So when I have a concentrate or those two concentrates and I mix up an elixir every day, it really makes a big difference in that, and in how I feel, and then how I ovulate. So I've been definitely sticking with that. And I also like anything that is in the gut health category. It's good to do in phases 1 and 2. And so a lot of times I will also add collagen peptides from Vital Proteins as well. And then that really is very, very kind of nutritive and has lots of support for making sure your inflammation and your immune system is optimized in this time so that healthy ovulation can actually occur. And if healthy ovulation occurs, then our phases 3 and 4 are going to be a lot less symptomatic. All right, the other thing that I got was the Vitanica branded Femme Rebalance. And so this is a company that Megan and I have been learning a lot about, and we hope to have Dr. Tori Hudson at some point on the podcast to talk about it, because Megan has really been liking the phase 1 support for PMS time. I got the Femra Balance because I wanted it for phases 1 and 2. And so it has multiple things in here, and I can read you some. So chase, treeberry, radiola root, boris seed, maca root, and vervain, and a couple other things, black cohosh, wild yam. So there's lots of things that are comprehensive for this part of the cycle. And so I have been adding this to my overall regimen. And so it's still relatively new, but I have used a lot of the ingredients alone, and I've already kind of proven to myself that with lab work that these work for me and that they're safe. And so this is what I got because I like both the brand and the stuff that's in it. So that's that. The other thing that I am always about is nutrient density for phases 1 and 2. Because honestly, between the inflammatory cascade and the immune system and ovulation, if you don't have enough nutrients in density and enough nutrients in variety, your body is not going to be able to effectively deal with all of those biochemical reactions. I mean, point blank, biochemical reactions need nutrients. And so I have a bunch of stuff, but recently I've been liking dissolvable things. I like the Nutrients multivitamin by the Mira and Jason Colton. And then recently I got something, it's called Oxylent, and it has a bunch of really awesome stuff in packets. And so because I've been traveling a bit, I got something that was dissolvable in water, so I can always, even if I'm traveling, I put a packet in and it's got a bunch of really awesome stuff. The way that I picked that, so, not all of you are going to have this or find the exact things, but I'm just going to break down how I look at supplements when I'm looking for nutrient density. So a couple things that I like about this one is that it has methylated folate, and so if you aren't sure how you're methylating, sometimes just jumping to the downstream version of that product or that vitamin or compound is a little bit of a safer way to go, in my opinion. It also has magnesium glycinate, which is something that we're going to talk about in a little bit in phases 3 and 4. But I think that is the most gentle on the stomach magnesium version. And if I'm not doing topical magnesium, then it's always magnesium glycinate. It also has something called superoxide dismutase, and that is a powerful antioxidant. And so because it's something that I've had separately as well, then I like the fact that this supplement had it in it as well. It also has a bunch of the B's, which, like we talked about with Laura Bryden, I know I'm talking about her a lot, but that episode was just so jam-packed full of stuff that you really need to go check out and listen to it because she's just amazing. But a bunch of B's that are really important, and then fat-soluble vitamins, which isn't always readily available in our diet, so I like that. Then other things that have been shown to be really great for ovulation are things like zinc, selenium, chromium. There's a couple others, but this one has all of it in it. And then lastly, the one I'll point out is L-arginine, which is a way of increasing nitric oxide levels. So that's NO, the compound, and that is actually a vasodilator. So it makes your blood flow better. And so they've used it in studies for improving ovarian and testicular blood flow and infertility patients, and male or female. And so and then they've also used it in a couple other health problems where blood flow seems to be an issue, such as headaches, heart things. So that, again, you need to know what's going on with you. That's not something I can generalize on a podcast. But for me, because I have pelvic adhesions and all my pelvic organs are stuck together thanks to endometriosis, blood flow is actually a really big thing for me. So in addition to the L-arginine, that's where I really focus on functional movement in my pelvis, because if we are always in the same position where we're sitting at work, sitting in a car, laying on our side in a basically sitting position just horizontally in bed, sitting on the couch when we get home, there is not that much movement, compression, stretching of all the different tissues that go into signaling. So when our body gets stiff and our tissues don't communicate well, it's really hard to have systemic cascades work smoothly. And we're really hoping to set a date for our interview with Katie Bowman, who she's one of my girl crushes and I love her, and I can't wait to have her on. But I've just learned so much from her of how important it is to support good blood flow for me, because I have so much pelvic pathology, but also how important it is for everyone when they're trying to optimize their health, and especially female hormonal type health. The last thing that was fascinating to learn with Laura was that, okay, this is Benadryl that I'm holding up for the Instagram folks, and she made a really important connection for both Megan and I, that estrogen, at times of estrogen being high, there can be histamine released from mast cells, and those are the cells that are responsible for like releasing histamine when we have allergies or exposed to pollen or something like that. So there is an estrogen link with that. Now, I have no intention of taking Benadryl long term for histamine. That's not my point, but I got Benadryl because I wanted to do essentially a challenge for myself to see if that was something that was impacting me. And I didn't want to get another supplement that I wasn't sure how I would react to, because I'm only planning on doing this once, maybe twice, but just when I have symptoms, if I take something that I absolutely know will decrease histamine and I feel better, that will be my test. If that's the case, then I'm going to follow it up most likely with Allergy Master from Dr. Jess's line. Megan is trying it now because she's already proven to herself that she's got some histamine issues especially around ovulation, and why she gets itchy and can't tolerate caffeine, and sometimes gets anxiety around that time, which Dr. Lara was mentioning could be linked to histamine. And so for her, she already got the supplement and she's taking it. For me, I haven't quite figured out if that's what's going on, because really I feel pretty good around the time that I ovulate, if I ovulate. It's just that my cycles have been so short that there's not much going on. So when things will change, like as my symptoms change, I'm going to do the Benadryl challenge. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of the tablets, but I'll just have them. And luckily, Benadryl is pretty cheap, so I was just able to get that for the test. All right. So hopefully that all makes sense so far. I'm going to go on to the last point. So optimizing detoxification pathways and addressing PMS symptoms that are coming up for me. So this is phases 3 and 4. Because I'm not ovulating now, I'm using my symptoms to kind of guide me. I've been doing this whole 4-phase cycle approach for coming up to 2 years now, so I just know generally how my body does, and it's almost hard to explain to other people because there's so much that goes into it. But the more you know, and the more you know what to look for, and the more you focus on communicating with your body and having a discussion rather than making it do stuff, then right now I'm going by how I feel, and then also by what's happening with my temperatures. I saw a slow kind of up slope where I'm pretty sure my body was making follicles, but there was no clear signal to have one mature and then be ovulated. And so as I saw that happening, then I have transition to phases 3 and 4. But of course, if you ovulate, then that is a very clear transition from phase 2 and 3. All right, so there are a couple things that I already do, and so again, I've shared that a lot, so I'm not going to get into it now. But one thing that I will say is that I've been transitioning my elixir from the tart cherry juice, one that I was talking about earlier, to a cranberry based elixir where I use a cranberry concentrate, liquid chlorophyll, and lemon. And so that's my very favorite one for phases 3 and 4. And sometimes I play around with the elixirs. Right now I feel like I have too much stuff to like really alternate, because I'm really trying to boost and give myself as much support as possible so that I can get back to ovulating as quickly as possible. So right now I'm not doing anything elaborate with elixirs. It's just those two where I swap them interchangeably. All right. The other thing that Dr. Laura had talked to us about was actually taking B6, which is pyridoxal 5-phosphate. And so right now I have the Natural Factors brand because they didn't have the one I normally get, but I generally order mine from Thorne, and that's the one I like the most. And then also magnesium glycinate, which I mentioned earlier. I generally get this from a compounding pharmacy because then my insurance pays for it, but I'm still waiting for that to go through, so I just have another cheaper brand, just the Call or KAL. I'm not sure how they say that. And that is all for mood swings and headaches. So part of my pain syndrome is axial pain, and by axial pain we mean like my head, my neck, and down my spine all tends to be really inflamed, and there's multiple feedback loops that are sending the inappropriate signal, and that's kind of what causes a lot of the central pain syndrome I have, fibromyalgia, all of these conditions kind of work in that same way. And because I'm having a lot of headaches and because my mood is impacted by the central nervous system dysfunction, then B6 and magnesium glycinate are something that there's fairly good data about, and so that's why she is such a big fan of it. And I was already doing the magnesium, and now I've added in that B6 as well, and I've been really liking it. So I'm going to continue doing that, and it seems to be helping for bloat as well. I'm not totally sure if that is something that everyone experiences or if it's just been me, but I just noticed that I'm less puffy, less cravey, all of that, while supporting my body with these two things. All right, and then of course, I would never be able to talk about detoxification without hitting up some of the other detoxification organs. So liver stuff is great when you're supporting, but when you're doing this process, you have to think about more than just your liver. So our detox organs include the lymphatics, the liver, kidneys, and colon. And you could kind of count blood vessels too, but for the most part, it's those four. So when I do actual detox baths, I am trying to help my lymphatics move things around, and then the lymphatics, all it does is take all those toxins to the bloodstream. From the bloodstream, then we have to filter it through the liver, and that's where I give my liver support. And then you have to actually eliminate it out of the body, which is where we talk about hydration. That's for the kidneys and for having good BMs, especially in the second half of your cycle. Because if you're not eliminating out of your body, there's the potential that it could be reabsorbed, and so will estrogen that's supposed to be eliminated. It'll get reabsorbed with bile salts, and progesterone balance gets thrown off. So having good BMs is so important for all the different parts of the body and the hormonal system coming together. So when I do detox baths, I add more than just the Epsom salts like I do at the other time. I add Himalayan pink salts. That's a lot of nutrients, trace minerals, all those things that my body needs to effectively carry out these biochemical reactions. Then I add bentonite clay that helps pull things out and bind the stuff that I'm sweating out, and then detoxing essential oils. I really like the citrus oils for that, but there's lots of essential oils depending on what you have, what you use, what you like smelling. All of those things can go into a detox bath. And so that is generally, I also add CBD sometimes when I have that. And so I will just do the detox baths as part of my kill, bind, sweat, but it's also part of the hormonal balance. And so I just basically make like a soup out of it and then I put me in it, and that's what I do. And then while I'm there, I do essentially wet skin brushing. You can either do dry skin brushing before you hop in the bath, or I like wet skin brushing because of chronic pain. I get pretty severe skin sensitivity, so sometimes I can't tolerate like waistbands touching my skin or any bands on a shirt or anything like that. And so I do wet skin brushing when I get in the tub and then at the end. And so as my heart rate kind of gets going, as I sweat, as I'm moving all of it around, letting go of toxins out of my pores, then I sometimes do it once, sometimes I do it twice, just depending on how much reserve I think I have. Because you definitely don't want to over detox, but if you're going along and everything's going well and you have enough support, like I feel like I do, then sometimes I do it twice and just kind of help move more stuff out. And then the rest of my protocol helps support that. And then I always make sure I'm staying really well hydrated while I'm in the bath, because you're going to be sweating stuff out. That's the point. But we also just talked about why staying well hydrated is an important part of the detoxing capacity that our body has, because that's going to be one of the ways that you're actually pulling things out of the body instead of recirculating it in the bloodstream over and over again, where it can cause problems. Okay. Speaking of that, we're going to hit up one last thing. So a lot of women have the experience of having their bowel habits change as their cycle goes wonky, and especially for me now with not ovulating, there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown off. And I can't stress enough how much having healthy bowel movements every day is important for hormonal balance, and we just really don't want those things getting reabsorbed, because there's a lot that can go into that, and that'll be the whole other podcast episode, because there's a lot to it. But that's the quick and dirty, I guess I can say that, around BMs. Then I just make sure that at this time I'm really staying regular and helping support my body, because a lot of women will get constipated around phase 4, and then they'll get a little bit of diarrhea type of stuff when they actually start their period, and a lot of that is local inflammation impacting things. And so that local inflammation is a sign that the whole system needs to be supported. So all of this, of course, applies to having that experience. At the same time, it's not like I could have necessarily prevented this. So, it's already happening. I need to find a way to support that. And the one thing that I've been taking is the Organic India Triphala for a colon support. And it has a couple things in here that just naturally and gently support having healthy bowel movements while not overcorrecting and causing something like diarrhea or increased motility, where you're kind of getting your food through your intestinal system too quickly, and so you can't absorb the nutrients, you can't reabsorb the water from the colon. So it's never good to overshoot. But I've just found that as someone who leans towards constipation more of the time, that having this on board really makes sure that throughout phases 3 and 4, I'm never really getting constipated, and so I'm not having to backtrack. I'm preemptively keeping it at bay, so that then I don't have to deal with either being uncomfortable or having the realization that I've gone 2 or 3 days, and now that becomes kind of a problem in and of itself, especially when I'm doing that kill, bind, sweat, because there's things that are floating around. It has to leave. It's almost, and I just saw Dr. Jolene Brighton had a post yesterday on Instagram that basically said you have to poop to have good estrogen balance, and I couldn't agree more. Like, the two are surprisingly interconnected, and a lot of us don't necessarily see that link in our own lives, but just from what we know about how the body works, it's very, very important. All right, so that is it. I really hope that was helpful for you guys to hear how I troubleshoot my cycle when it all goes to hell, because if you've been there, you know how problematic it is and how detrimental it can be on your mindset, on your health, on your energy levels, and the things that you do in the world. Because ideally, we want you to have amazing health so that you can go out and contribute to the world powerfully and to really live out your passions. And if you're not able to do that, then you can't help the people that are waiting for you to bring what you bring to the table. So we really want you guys to, do this kind of work for yourself as well, because we want you to be feeling good enough to do all those things that make you happy and make you feel good. So that's that. Make sure you go check out our PMS project. We have a webinar coming up. I know you guys, when you're listening to the podcast, you already heard about this a little bit, but basically on the webinar, if you come, you'll get 50% off. And then afterwards, we'll off the program. And then if you are coming afterwards, just head on over to zestyginger.com/PMS-project. And that will be your link to get signed up for the program. And we are so, so, so excited about it. It's got meditations that I made especially for you guys for every single phase. We have rituals that Megan and I actively do to support ourselves and support showing ourselves love and building that special relationship with ourselves, which us women and men, honestly, oftentimes neglect. And then food goals, movement goals, elixir recipes, protein ball recipes with seed cycling, all of that is going to be in the PMS project. So definitely don't miss all of that coming out, because it's going to be amazing for you. All right, that is it for today. Thank you. Hi, Instagram folks. I'm back. I'm just going to stay on for a few minutes until, probably Instagram's going to kick me off soon. But if you guys have any questions that you want to ask real quick about anything that I said, you can go ahead. And I was a little nervous about doing the whole podcast and live, but it worked out. I liked my sticky note method. If anyone is like me and you're like, that just seems like a whole lot of stuff to manage and look at the comments, I put a sticky note over it so I couldn't get distracted, and it actually worked pretty well. All right, well, it doesn't seem like you guys have questions over anything, so I will catch y'all later. Mwah. Have a good day.